So away from the community there and their efforts to come to terms with what's happened, there, of course, have been violence. There's been disorder. We're joined now by Lord Walney, who's the government's independent advisor on political violence and disruption. Very good morning to you, and thank you for your time this morning. Given what's happened over the past few days, I just want, have you had occasion to offer advice or had conversations with the Home Secretary or the Prime Minister?
Well, in a way, there is the review which I submitted to the government literally 24 hours before the general election, on which the incoming government have said that it will look at carefully, has a number of recommendations that are pertinent in this regard, and I really welcome the leadership that's shown by Keir Starmer and the Home Office ministerial team in the last 24 hours, particularly honing in on the need to stop the known troublemakers who are clearly exploiting the grief and tension that are felt in Southport and across the country, to use the cover of protest as a platform for deliberate violent disorder, and we need to stop those people from being able to get to travel to those places and whip up unrest.
Yes, and we heard from Keir Starmer about this new National Violent Disorder Unit, and that's very much looking forward. You could tell there was, I think, a degree of anger in his voice when he was talking about this. Yeah. That is something that is ongoing and they'll be working on. I mean, today, tomorrow, the weekend. Yeah. Do you think that enough measures are in place and the police have the resources necessary in the immediate term? Because the evidence we've seen is that in Southport, for example, they really struggled to cope with what was an unprecedented and presumably, and I don't know what you think, but maybe a slightly unexpected scenario.
Well, I mean, I think certainly there was a level of volatility in Southport, which may have taken the police somewhat by surprise. But clearly there is intelligence that these gatherings and the tension of the week is being very deliberately exploited by far-right groups. And there are, I think, a number of powers that the police have to be able to try to keep things under control. I would like to see them using the maximum effect the existing powers in the Public Order Act, where there is a threat of serious disorder. People have the power to refuse protests, and what is happening here is not legitimate protest in any way. The Prime Minister was absolutely right to say this. We have a fundamental right to protest embedded in our liberal democracy. It is not a right to riot. It is not a right to criminality. And what is happening at the moment is not protest. And so the police, I think, well, I hope will be looking carefully at what has happened over the last few days and be thinking, actually, I hope to more preventative measures rather than allowing large and volatile crowds to gather and then seeing things kick off. I hope they will do everything in their power actually to prevent getting into this situation in the first place.
Now, I know you've got a long history of advising on these issues. In your experience and given what you're seeing literally over the past few days and probably over the recent past, do you see a clear rise? And a lot of people are scared of some of the scenes they're seeing, these groups that are gathering sporadically in places. Are you seeing a clear rise in that kind of behaviour?
What you've had over recent years is that organisationally, the far right has been at a relative low ebb, and organisations, parties, movements have formally disbanded or become defunct. But what has been made clear this week is that those forces, that ideology, those individuals are still absolutely there and can move very quickly and form into new groups. So, I mean, I guess to people looking at this, it would not have been a surprise that you can have this activity. What I think your really moving package before this showed is that the that violence from a small minority can have a devastating effect, but is absolutely anathema to the overwhelming majority of people in communities that are affected and may be worried about particular issues. And so the challenge now for all of us, for lawmakers, for the government, for the police, for communities themselves, is how do you empower and protect that mainstream majority that may have legitimate worries, but absolutely want to be peaceable and live alongside their neighbours? And how do you shut out and prevent this kind of violent disorder that is being pushed by a far right, which unfortunately we have seen this week are still very much around in our midst?
Lord Walney, thank you for your time this morning. Lord Walney is Political Violence and Disruption Advisor to the government. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.